A poltergeist is an alleged ghost, elemental, entity, agency, secondary personality, spirit imp, or familiar with certain unpleasant characteristics: mischievous, destructive, noisy, cruel, erratic, thievish, spiteful, ruthless, resourceful, and vampiric. In one of the best documented cases, that of Enfield Poltergeist, 1977, amongst many other things that happened, marbles flew through the air and landed on the floor without rolling. Doors and drawers opened of their own accord. Objects such as teaspoons, a cardboard box, and even a fish tank lid jumped of their own accord. Raps and bangs were made in a way that showed apparent intelligence. It sounds that the poltergeist can and should play the lead role in any serious paranormal investigation, and certainly tends to in any modern paranormal horror movie. Strangely though, the opposite seems to be the case. It has been estimated that by 2006, there have been 1,200 groups involved in paranormal research. The vast majority of these groups would define themselves as being of the ghost hunting type. Such research has largely become spending the night in old creepy houses looking for small changes in temperature, EMF readings, or seeing something strange in the corner of your eye. However, if an EMF meter blips or you saw a shadowy figure for a second or two at 4 AM, spaced out with coffee and lack of sleep, what does it actually prove? The power of the paranormal, or the strange powers of a double espresso? This newfound direction has been encouraged by TV series of varying quality, be it Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, Haunted, Most Haunted, or even Help, My House is Haunted. Each title seems to be trying to outdo the other, and most of them have disclaimers for being for entertainment purposes only. Perhaps it could be called a strange phenomenon in itself. During all this period, only fleeting reference has been made to poltergeist phenomena, which on the whole has been treated like a rather annoying relative, largely uninvited to the new paranormal extravaganza. Since Colin Wilson's bestseller, Poltergeist, a classic study in destructive haunting, was published in 1981, whilst there have been some books published on one-off poltergeist incidences, there have been few, if any, published about the subject itself. In some ways, this has not been a bad thing, as the people-centered nature of poltergeist phenomena certainly challenges an amateur investigator with ethical questions that are not so important in a plain, often uninhabited haunted house. Is it possible though that this lack of current interest could actually be holding back in discovering the truth or otherwise in the paranormal itself? Most experiences of ghosts have alternative, and if we're being honest, plausible psychological explanations, such as confirmation bias and top-down processing. However, as poltergeists move things, throw things, and make loud, recordable bangs, there comes a point where any psychological theory seems silly in providing an explanation for that. If an object is in one place and then moved or thrown to another without explanation, it seems much more of a case of being fact or fraud. Either there was some trickery involved, or it was something truly weird and unexplained, which is in essence what the paranormal actually is. Why has such powerful phenomena been so long neglected? One of the clues might be on the website of the Society for Psychical Research, where it is stated in its PSI encyclopedia that poltergeist activity is very rare and often lasts only a few days or weeks. That, to be fair, is most people's perception. Real-life cases such as the Enfield case, or the Black Monk of Pontefract, another ordinary council house where poltergeists threw a grandfather clock down the stairs, are akin to winning the Paranormal Investigation National Lottery jackpot. Perhaps most paranormal investigators are suffering from an understandable case of their own confirmation bias, but perhaps here we are only starting to scratch the surface of the phenomena. Perhaps that annoying relative of ghosts could be a very close relative indeed, possibly even something close to being a sibling. The The paranormal researchers Alan Gould and Tony Cornell found a significant overlap of ghost and poltergeist phenomena in an exhaustive study of over 500 cases. A more modern example of this is The Cage, an old house in St. Osoph, Essex, which started with apparitions appearing to the owner, Vanessa Mitchell, but where flying objects and scratches on people's skin was to be the dominant factors later. This overlap could be much more significant when it becomes apparent that many non-poltergeist hauntings are based on the folklore of old buildings and places with very little recent evidence indeed. Does, for example, the ghost of Dame Dorothy Selby really haunt the magnificent manor of Ightham Moat? Legend has it she was bricked up there for betraying the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament in 1605. Reality states she has a large mausoleum at St. Peter's Church, Ightham, where she was buried in 1941, a ghost story about a ghost which couldn't exist. Does the ghost ship Lady Loverbond really sail every 50 years after being wrecked? All lives lost. On the notorious Goodwin Sands, Kent, in 1747. The fact is there was no report in Lloyd's list of wrecks at the time. The fact is that the associated tale is a logically impossible one, that of the first mate running the boat aground because of a jealous love he had for a newlywed bride. For if all lives were lost, who passed down the initial tale? This did not stop hundreds of paranormal investigators from attending the scene at the 1997 50-year anniversary, with predictably no results. Take away cases of legend and romantic whimsy, and poltergeist phenomena in an actual active haunting might be very common indeed. It might also be possible that many poltergeist cases are misreported. As when strange things happen, there is a tendency for people to report things within their own familiar folklore. Tales of duende or goblins have not been uncommon in the past in Latin America, except these mischievous duende have a familiar poltergeist habit of throwing things around, but for the want of common terminology, would fall outside the radar of a serious paranormal researcher. A little bit more familiar to us is the Strigoi of Romania, or the Vikalagast of Greece, that multi-named entity common in the Slavic states of Eastern Europe, and more familiarly termed by us in the West as the vampire. This has been given a wonderfully kitsch gothic appearance by the author Bram Stoker in his novel Dracula, which helps make many of us assume it to be totally a fictitious beast. However, as Richard Sugg of Durham University has argued, incidences reported as vampire ones in countries that accept the concept have a strangely familiar ring. Lots of noises, movements of objects, and scaring the poor victims witless. Once the cultural concepts are unravelled, the poltergeist seems to be a well-travelled entity for sure. Harry Price was once ridiculed for investigating an entity that was identified as a talking mongoose, who played noisy pranks on a 14-year-old girl in a remote cottage at Cashan's Gap, Isle of Man. In the context of poltergeist goblins and poltergeist vampires, a poltergeist mongoose starts to seem somewhat feasible, possibly even somewhat mundane. If that wasn't enough to convince the reader of the potential common nature of the poltergeist, it might also be possible that many cases are not reported at all. Incidences that, while both disconcerting and unexplained, are not dynamic or powerful enough to prompt any experts to be contacted. Most of us have experienced cases where a valued object has simply disappeared, to be found again either back in the same place or somewhere else where it could have been inconceivable to have put it. Most of us simply shrug our shoulders and get on with our busy lives and say it was just one of those things. But this is also just one of those things, which is so very common in a more obvious poltergeist case. So could it not also be possible that so much low-level poltergeist activity just gets shrugged off and what is reported is simply the tip of the iceberg. Perhaps then it's time for a change in the way we try to investigate and prove the paranormal. Are we using too much equipment to try to detect small changes that may or may not have meaning in a so-called haunted house? And in doing so, are we missing the poltergeist? Elephant in the room. It may be still for debate as to whether poltergeist phenomena are common or rare, or possibly non-existent. What I don't think is up for debate is that, for all the reasons given, research into and publications on the subject are definitely far too rare. Surely, 39 years after Colin Wilson's influential and best-selling book, it should be time to revisit the subject and help advance that debate again. So, let the debate commence. If you would like to learn more, then please take a look at our book, Poltergeist, A New Investigation into Destructive Haunting by John Fraser, available now from Sixth Books. Thank you so much for watching, subscribe for future content, and we'll see you next time.